Okay, welcome back. We have been talking about Hayek's ideas about social theory, and actually he's very interesting in this regard. Maybe we can talk about Hayek this way. Last time we talked about the theses developed by Hayek. One was the human minds are alike, invariance of human mind. The second thesis is especially interesting, the hermeneutics, no objective facts in the social sciences. But, positivism teaches us that the basic aim of science is to understand the causal relations among facts, explaining the facts, causal relations, constant conjunctions among atomistic and discrete events. So science aims to reach some empirical regularities. They call it laws, etc., etc. But Hayek actually says that there's no such thing as a fact in the social realm. So here's the quotation from Hayek himself from the Scientism and the Study of Society, Part 1. The special difficulties of social sciences, etc., etc., derives from the fact that in them, in social sciences, ideas appear in two capacities. One is as part of their object and as ideas about the object. The first part of the distinction is that we can be talking about the ideas which are constitutive of the phenomena we want to explain. So this is exactly the point of the hermeneutical character of social facts, or social relations. Actually, they are constituted by the beliefs, expectations, actions of individuals in general. And also we can talk about the ideas about these phenomena, but the distinction between them is not a clear-cut distinction, actually. What we think about the society may very well affect the society itself. Remember the relationship between social structures and individual action. Social structures are both unacknowledged conditions and the unintended consequences of intentional action. And again, Hayek says that what people think or believe, expect, etc., about some factor or relation or thing, social thing, whatever it is, create some real effects. This is the double hermeneutical idea, as opposed to the natural laws that operate irrespective of human wants. So our wants, our expectations, our beliefs are also constitutive society. They are an important agent that shapes and sometimes transforms the society in this regard. So because of this, social laws are different from the natural ones. What is relevant in the study of society is not whether these laws of nature are true in any objective sense, but solely whether they are believed and acted upon by people. So this is an important point. But at the same time, this thesis, dispersion of knowledge, is about the idea of the use of knowledge in the market system. Even though human minds are similar, knowledge and beliefs of each individual must be different. And as I said before, the basic function of the market system is to collect, process, and disseminate this information in a useful way. Useful in the sense that they should be contributing to the satisfaction of individuals, self-interested behavior. So this is the whole idea of invisible hand in Hayek. Invisible hand, the market mechanism itself, emerges on the basis of intentional actions of individuals. But still, it has actually some functions, which is the collection and procession of the information that is at the end of individuals. So this is basically a functionalist claim. So we have to talk about functionalism. Okay, let's talk about here. We can see this. Again, we return to this idea of social transformational model of social activity, but we can talk about functionalism. What is functionalism? Functionalism is basically the idea that any social relation or institution or any kind of social collectivity must have a function, must fulfill a specific function. You know, this is the idea of the mechanical order. Think about the mechanical clocks. You know, there's one basic function of the clock, which is showing the time. So each clock is formed, is built upon some different parts, and it's a mechanical system, basically. So each part within the system, mechanical system, must fulfill a function so that the clock works in an efficient way and shows us the time. And, you know, there are some functional claims in this regard. For example, we can ask why windmills has some wings. Well, it's simple because, you know, it's about wind. Wind blows and rotates these wings. This wing will rotate the other thing and produce some flour or whatever. So this is the basic mechanism that explains the working of the windmill. So any part of the system or the machine, so to speak, must fulfill a function. Well, this is understandable if you are to talk about some designed mechanisms, such as the mechanical clock or windmills, etc. But can we say the same thing about social system? Well, first of all, is society like a mechanical system? Well, according to the Newtonian heritage we have been talking about, you know, the idea of invisible hand presents itself a kind of mechanical system. Adam Smith actually himself once said that, you know, his whole aim was to establish a social system which along the ways of Newtonian mechanics. So the answer was the idea of invisible hand, the market mechanism. Still we talk in these jargon, right? Market is a mechanism, capitalism is a system, it's like a machine. So we can think that capitalism was actually designed to fulfill a specific end sometimes. But the problem with the social system is that there's no mechanism that is intentionally built to fulfill some specific function. But still, we talk about as if social relations or social institutions do have some functions to fulfill. So that is the idea of functionalism. Functionalism is usually understood as the ontological thesis that function is all important and stuff or composition of the thing is question is nothing. Stuff is relevant at most as the material carrier of functions, but in as much as two things perform the same function, their material or compositional differences do not matter. Functionalism is something like that. This is a passage from Anthony Giddens's book, Constitution of Society. And we have two different conceptions here in this presentation. You know, one idea is the transformational model of social activity, as we have been talking about. The social activities are produced or reproduced through purposive human action, intentional human action, and there will be some unintended consequences of these intentional actions. But on the other hand, in the functionalist theory, we say that social activities do fulfill some functional need. Market mechanism exists and function by virtue of its role in collecting and emanating information. So the basic function of the market system or the prices is to reflect individual information or piecemeal information that was collected and processed by the system itself. So as any system, any social or economic system can be defined or characterized by its function, by its working to fulfill a specific function. You know, in economics, we talk about the allocation of resources. So the best mechanism to allocate these resources so we say, is the market mechanism. You know, we leave the problem, the solution of the problem to the market itself through the interaction between demand and supply, and therefore a market price and equilibrium price will emerge, and the equilibrium in each market will assure that the resources will be allocated in an efficient way. This is the idea of invisible hand at the same time, right? So the basic function of the market system is resource allocation. This is not different from Hayek's understanding. It's the same, actually. You know, Hayek says that demand actually is the expression of individual tastes and beliefs and wants, basically. Supply depends upon the actions of the entrepreneurs that gets the signals from the prices and make their decisions about production. So interaction of demand and supply, or the consumers and the producers or the entrepreneurs, will create some equilibrium in the market, and through these actions, collective actions of individuals, demand and supply decisions, a market system will emerge and reproduces itself. So functionalism is the idea that any social relation or economic relation or mechanism must fulfill a function. One of the most famous examples to this functionalist thought in sociology was developed by Robert Merton, sociologist, and he gives the famous example of the rain dance ceremony of the Native American Hopi tribe. You know, the basic function of the rain dance ceremony is, you know, seems to be achieving the objective of rain, right? But there's also a latent function, according to Merton, of this action or the collective action. This rain dance ceremony actually creates the bonds within the society, and it contributes to the reproduction of the society. You know, through participating in these kinds of ceremonies, we actually feel ourselves as part and parcel of the society or the social whole. So we see ourselves as an important part of the society, and the connectedness we affirm our feeling of connectedness with other members of the society. So these kinds of ceremonies, or any kind of ceremonies for that matter, would fulfill the function of reproduction of the society through creating social solidarity, basically. So any social relationship must fulfill a function. So this idea is very widespread, actually, in the social theory. There are different types of functionalism, but in economics, we can say that usually the most widespread use of the idea of functionalism can be revealed in the idea of black boxist form of functionalism. It says basically that two compositionally different things can perform the same external activities or roles or functions. It disregards the inner working of the things in question. You know, there's a black box, each produces some function. For example, market system produces, fulfills the function of the allocation of resources. But usually, if we don't want to explain, or if we don't try to explain how this specific mechanism works, this will fail. This kind of explanation will fail because we only point out the effects of the working of this mechanism, not how the mechanism itself works. So we don't care about the inner workings of the mechanism. We only point out the effects that this mechanism produces, for example. There are other types of functionalist approach. This adaptationist approach is actually a widespread approach in biology, especially in evolutionary biology. When we are talking about, when we will talk about evolutionary economics, we will return to this issue. But as a beginning, we can mention a very important paper by two biologists, one biologist, one paleontologist, I guess. Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Lewontin, and they wrote in 1980s, I guess. An important paper, The Critique of the Adaptationist Program. It's about the adaptationist explanation of biological system, and which is also important from an economic or social theoretic perspective, I believe. You know, think about the rationality program or the Dr. Pangloss idea. You know, Dr. Pangloss was the personality of Voltaire's novel Candide. He says that this is the best of possible worlds, the world in which we live. So this actually is the idea of Leibniz's. Leibniz says that there's a pre-established harmony in the world of the existence. So this harmony was established obviously by God, and it's a mechanical system. It's along the similar lines. Newton has the same idea, mechanical systems. Even Leibniz himself criticized Newton that Newton's mechanism is not mechanistic enough, or something like that. So Dr. Pangloss is the representative of this idea. He always says that, he keeps saying that this is the best of all possible worlds, no matter how problems or evil or any kind of failures exist in this world. So there can be no better world than this one. So this idea can be used in the evolutionary process. We are talking about biological evolution here, by the way. And these guys, Gould and Lewontin, criticize this kind of Panglossian idea. And they argue that studies under the adaptationist program generally proceed in two steps. Adaptation, each social system or the society in general, or the market system in general, as Hayek says, is evolving. So the basic mechanism of evolution is the idea of adaptation to the environment, etc., etc. So basically, they argue that these biologists, or Gould and Lewontin, argues that the adaptationist program proceeds in two steps. One, an organism is atomized into traits, and these traits are explained as structures optimally designed by natural selection for their functions. So this is a very interesting idea. Each organ or any kind of traits that exist within the body, within an organism, for example, must fulfill a specific function. Dr. Pangloss says that why do we have nose? Because we need it to carry our glasses. So it's a very simplistic explanation, of course, caricaturing, but it is the similar, why do cows have tails? Because the basic function of tails is to, deal with the flies, to get them away, etc. So these traits can be seen as optimally designed by natural selection. Remember this guy, the writer of the book I mentioned before, Selfish Gene? We can see the very organism. The name of the guy was Richard Dawkins, by the way. And he's also the author of The Blind Watchmaker. So it's also an interesting book. His idea is something like this. Whatever exists in the world, in terms of the biological world, actually, exists because of these kinds of functions, adaptations. Remember, genes collaborate with each other and create the body. This Samuel Butler once said something like this: a chicken is a way for an egg to produce other eggs. So this is the idea that is used in the Selfish Gene book, and also in The Blind Watchmaker. He argues that basically we can see the evolutionary process or the natural selection process as a kind of designed mechanism, designing some machine will produce some effects which function, which fulfill some specific function. So in the biological world, we actually have a similar process. Maybe there's no designer, or we don't need to seek a designer in this process, but the natural selection by itself acts like as if it designs the evolutionary process, creation of organisms and their evolutions, etc., etc. So basically, it's really difficult to define what a trait is, but the idea is that there's a kind of rational optimization process going on in the natural evolution or biological evolution as well. This is the first idea. And this is the second idea. We can present the whole process of evolution as a kind of optimization process. It's a result of the rational choice theory, right? Just like in the human world, in the biological world, we can also talk about the optimizational behavior of the genes, selfish genes, or other kinds of organisms, or whatever. But after the failure of part-by-part optimization, you have to talk about the optimization process of each part that together creating the organism or the species in question, whatever it is, then it is usually not possible to do that. But still, we can say that there's an interaction via the dictum that an organism cannot optimize each part without imposing expenses on the others. As an economist, we can understand this idea, right? There are costs and benefits in this picture. So a basic idea is that there's a rational choice theory working here and the process of optimization, as if there are objectives that are to be achieved, and there are also resources or means that can be used by the organism or the process itself. So the problem is how to use these means in the best way, in the most efficient way. This is an idea that economists would love to use, right? Basically. So, of course, there will be some failures or suboptimalities existing in this picture, but again, we can say that suboptimality might represent anything other than the immediate work for natural selection. Dr. Pangloss said, in explaining to Candide why he suffered from venereal disease, it is indispensable in this best of words, for if Columbus, when visiting the West Indies, had not caught this disease, which poisons the source of generation, which frequently even hinders generation, and is clearly opposed to the great end of nature, we should have neither chocolate nor cochineal. So any social relation or social entity, for that matter, would produce some effect which actually fulfills some function. So that's the idea. Okay, I'm going to put again this into the Google Classroom thing. So this is the basic, excuse me, idea of functionalism. So the functionalism is very attractive for the social scientist in general, but also it is attractive to biological evolutionary process, biologists basically. But these guys criticize this idea. You cannot explain biological processes on the basis of some optimization process or on the basis of rational choice theory. But can we do the same for the social sciences? We can do the same as economists do. In terms of the individual behavior can be explained on the basis of rational choice theory, but can we say the same thing about the social system or social collectivities? That's the basic problem. Functionalists argue that it is possible to use some kind of optimizational process to explain the emergence and reproduction of social systems, but the problem is that social systems are not designed by some intentional agency. That's the basic problem. You know, if you are capable of designing some kind of system, you will design it according to the principles of functionalism. It may fulfill some specific function, right? Basically, that's the idea. But social relations, social collectivity, social system or structures are not created by conscious design. There's no such thing in the social theory or the reproduction of society. So in this case, functionalist explanations would not be enough, or they cannot be accepted from the social theoretic point of view. So maybe I should stop here and